So, welcome. If you've been following me, you notice that I haven't made any progress on the Magic Sleeve in a little while, so I just want to show you an update right now. Still having a little bit of trouble here and there, and I still need to get this stuff soldered onto a proto board, so we're breadboarded right now, which looks really messy. And we're working on Arduino Leonardo, which is a lot larger than what I'm going to end up going with, which will either be a LilyPad or an Arduino Micro. Anyway, that being said, let's see what we got differently here. So, all in all, it looks like this. This, I think I can actually get much smaller. I'm going to be putting it on a proto board right now. I'm in the middle of mapping out how that's going to look, but you don't need to see that. Once this is all done, I imagine actually all of the circuitry is going to be placed right here on the wrist. This is actually, despite it being all tangled, this is pretty light. I think the majority of the weight is actually right here, and it's in the wires themselves. I'm hoping to actually have a new version of the glove created that actually has 3 layers of fabric. One on the top, one that holds the circuitry, and then one that actually has the skin contact. Alright, so let me give you a quick tour of the sensors that I have on here. So up top, and you've seen this before, I have a PSP. This is just a joystick, just an X and a Y value. I used to have a LilyPad button right here. That wasn't quite practical, I felt, or it didn't feel as intuitive, so I actually put on 4 strips of electroconductive fabric right here. So the nice thing is I can just tap one of my fingertips here for input, but if I want to, I can also bring my fingers together and I actually get sort of a 4-button pan. You can think of it as like an A, B, X, Y sort of gig. I have a piezoelectric knock sensor. This is actually just pretty much exclusively for detecting finger snaps. While we're here, I want to show you this. This guy is the 3-axis magnetometer. I keep a permanent magnet right here in my palm. You're not going to be able to see it right now. And what this does is this actually tells me the orientation and distance away from that magnet. It's a lot more sensitive than you'd think. Normally this is just used as like a compass in cell phones, but it's actually very, very sensitive to the magnetic field of a permanent magnet. My goal would be to have 3 of these on each of the major fingers here. The pinky finger is kind of going to get left out because it normally rolls with the ring finger. It's just a really reliable way to detect closed fist or 1 finger out or 2 fingers out or something like that. A lot of the libraries that are used for using computer vision for those purposes aren't great. And I also think that flex sensors can be unreliable because they can't really tell the difference between fingers curled, like if I did something like this versus something like this. To my knowledge, I'm actually the first one to use a magnetometer to look at fine motor control. So on the back here, we have right there, that is our little red panel right here, is a 3-axis accelerometer. So that's pretty standard. That, more than anything, I mean, yeah, it can control vibrations or like high-fiving or waving or something like that, whatever you're doing. But more importantly, it actually can detect hand orientation, which axis is down at any one point in time because gravity tends to go in one direction. So you can tell when your hand is pointing like this, or when you have your hand upside down, or you have your hand or fist raised. I decided to put it at a place where it's not going to move, where it's not going to move too much according to the way you actually stretch your hand. Also right here, and you can't see it because I actually have it sewn underneath a piece of fabric, this is actually what I'm attaching the electrodes to. The electrodes are, of course, the little button pads from the fingers earlier. I actually have room for another 8 on here if I just use the same components. The magnetometer, the accelerometer, and the electrode sensor right here, these all work on the I2C, or I2C integrated circuit deal, which is a pretty interesting protocol. It's difficult to work with unless you have a board that's as awesome as like the Leonardo or an Arduino Uno. The reason I'm going with the Arduino Leonardo for right now is because it's actually much easier to develop like that. I think eventually I want to get away from the Leonardo, which, as you can see, kind of leaves a big, almost credit card size footprint. There's no real great, I mean, this could theoretically fit on your wrist like this, but it just feels too bulky. So I'd want to go with something like a Micro or an Arduino LilyPad, which, so this is the size of a Leonardo. This is the size in comparison to a LilyPad, a little bit smaller, much more sewing friendly. And then of course there's the Arduino Micro, which is much smaller. The thing is, it doesn't natively support a 3.3 and 5-point voltage output to ground. I need 3.3 to work with these I2C sensors, but I need 5 volt to work with, for instance, the knock sensor and the joystick. So I'm going to have to use what's called a logic level converter, which I got that working earlier, but it was a real hassle. I think, though, the benefit, it's worth that, I guess, production hold to get the electronics that much smaller. You can see it's going to be a big difference right there. I mean, you could actually even solder this directly onto the board. I'm not going to, but you could. Oh yeah, and then of course you've seen this, my EMG sensor, which is just a couple electrodes in a sleeve. This right here is a lithium-ion battery holder. The battery I use is this. It's this big, which is pretty bulky as well. When I do the wireless stuff, I just end up sliding it down my wrist like this. This is just so I have something to work with for an extended period of time. You can get these much smaller that just don't have quite the same life, but I mean, when I'm developing, I want to use something a bit bigger. That one puts out a consistent 5 volt signal. So those are the individual sensors themselves. Let's go ahead and see how this looks when if the GUI will oblige. Having some issues with some of the serial action earlier. Here we go. So we have the accelerometer up top. You can see that's working. The magnetometer, which of course I only have here on my ring finger. If I bring in my finger here, you can see it detects that. Even if I wave it back and forth, it'll detect the difference there. If I curl my finger, it gives one value. If I bring my finger over in an arc, it brings a different value. That's pretty cool. The knock sensor at the bottom, you can see that whenever I snap, we're lighting up nice and red here. The electrodes, so you can tap each one of those. I have my X and Y value over here as I put with the joystick. Those are messing around. For the muscle sensor, if I actually flex my arm, that spikes pretty high. Anyway, all of the electronics right here, I could actually get that pretty easily put onto a proto board again once I've got that design finished. And then of course Leonardo itself is pretty bulky, and then once I'm done with that, I'll have enough room to create the XB, or to use the XB, although I'm also considering using a Bluetooth module while we're just doing testing. Cool, so stay tuned, hopefully I have more updates for you.